This morning, we take a look at equity in education. As the achievement gap continues to persist, we turn to Florida, where Governor DeSantis is making some decisions, Ben, that are not necessarily helping children of color. And this is significant because that achievement gap has been something that has existed in this country, I want to say for decades, if not since its inception. And so while we would hope our politicians, our community leaders are advocating for different measures, resources to be deployed that would help eliminate that achievement gap, it feels as though, specifically in Florida, they're doing quite the opposite.
Absolutely. Good morning, Georgia. Ron DeSantis is, I don't quite have the name or the word to describe him. He is simultaneously buffoonish, but very, very calculated in how he approaches his position as governor of the state of Florida. In this next clip, you're going to see him express that it is an issue of liberal educators who are teaching kids to hate this country. And the context is within the critical race theory discussion that we've been talking about for some time now. And that's been the number one thing that Republicans want us to be afraid of. And that's basically learning about what this country did to Black people in this country. That said, let's take a listen into Ron DeSantis as he explains how any random parent will be able to inspect curriculum and sue these schools who are already strapped for resources. Take a listen in.
Political agenda is they want these kids to hate this country. They want them to reject our founding, our institutions, and they want to replace that with their leftist ideology, which would obviously be disastrous for this country's future. So the stakes are very high on that. But there's a problem when you can say it, you can't do it. But what if they defy you? What if they're doing it? And so what we're going to be doing in this upcoming legislative session, we're going to give parents the ability to go in and get legal relief if they're not following our state standards with respect to history and government. And I think empowering parents to be involved, making sure parents have a right to inspect the curriculum. And it's not just about critical race theory. I mean, there's a lot of other inappropriate content that can be smuggled in by public schools. And in some parts of the country have it way worse than Florida in that regard. So parents, this idea of parents don't have a right to be involved.
And that's what he's trying to call forth an army of parents to go after teachers who, and honestly, Georgia, at the end of the day, it really can boil down to something as simple as a parent not liking a teacher and then instituting one of these lawsuits. So as you stated at the beginning, Ron DeSantis is really striking at the heart of what's in the best interest for our children.
You know, think about this, Ben. What was the name of your favorite teacher when you went to school?
The first one that comes to mind is Miss Hobbs.
Miss Hobbs. Imagine
second grade.
Imagine Miss Hobbs being taken to court, being sued by Karen herself, simply because Miss Hobbs is good with the Black kids. Imagine that, because to me, I mean, when you take away the veil, when you really look at what is behind this, Governor DeSantis he's guising this bill saying, oh, liberal educators can be punished. Liberal educators can be sued. They're teaching our children how to hate our country. You're opening up the door for a class of people, educators who are already overworked and underpaid, right? And now you're saying that lawsuits can be brought forth against them. Are the schools going to provide insurance? Are the schools going to provide legal aid? Because think about Miss Hobbs. Did she really earn enough money to be able to legally defend herself?
That's right. Because
she was the student that was providing the extra attention or care or compassion to students. And specifically, it sounds like students of color. But now teachers like her, teachers like Mr. O'Neill, The teacher who taught me how to balance a checkbook, even though that wasn't a part of the curriculum. Oh, no, he's going off of the approved curriculum, teaching kids things other than what's on the curriculum. Let's sue him.
That's right.
Now that's what's going to happen. That we're going to see a whole new wave of Karens who are going to feel empowered that they can come after educators, whether it's because they don't agree with what they're teaching in the class, whether it's because they don't like them, simply as you pointed out earlier.
That's right. That's right. And the answer is no. I mean, I taught for quite a few years before this, and I stopped teaching because the pay was not commensurate with the amount of labor. It was a mathematical calculation for me. The amount of hours that we had to spend as teachers beyond the 9 to 5 or whatever our shift was for our grade. Teachers don't make enough money to handle lawsuits. They barely make enough money to do what they're currently doing and keep their lights on. And that's exactly what Ron DeSantis is counting on here. He's counting on teachers being so intimidated. It's called the chilling effect. He wants the chilling effect to be so intimidating that teachers would never think about teaching something other than Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
Well, and really, what is this response to? This is a response to the controversy surrounding CRT. And this is a response not to the needs of the children and the students or the parents. This is a response to uphold white supremacy.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what they're going to be able to do is to tie this bigotry to whatever other ignorant thing they need to accomplish, right? They're going to tie this attack against critical race theory to attacking mask mandates. The same people who show up at the school board meetings and yelling into the microphone about mask mandates and about the vaccine not happening or coming to the schools, those are the same people who are going to show up to the classrooms and to sue these parents, because they're all the same group of people who don't listen to reason and logic, but they instead listen to this oath and listen to the bigotry that's necessary to protect, like you said, white supremacy in this country.
You know, but we shouldn't be surprised. DeSantis is the same governor who was selling merchandise on his website mocking the pandemic. DeSantis has also had a number of other bills that he has pushed forward that have not resulted in equitable outcomes for communities of color. So we shouldn't be surprised. But, you know, what we should take note of is the caucasity that he has to attack our educators and to try to coin some of them as liberal and to now take this divide that we've seen across our nation to take this divide even further and deeper into our school systems. What we need to be worried about is deploying resources so that our children are getting adequate education. What we need to be worried about in our school systems is making sure that we are combating the achievement gap. That's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at the graduation rate, if anything, and asking ourselves, how can we ensure that our children are making it across the finish line and being teed up to go on to further their education in college? I mean, if we have the resources to sit here and come up with legislation to allow our educators to be sued, then damn it, I think we should have some resources to start putting towards tuition for that first year of college. It just, to me, it's frustrating to see that this politician specifically is using his time, his political platform, and taxpayer dollars.
That's right.
To do this. But, you know, that's just my thought on this. Ben, do we have the number for Collins this morning? I'd love to hear what our audience is thinking, especially if you're a parent. What has your experience been in the school systems? And do you think that we should move our education system to a place where educators can be sued?
Who do we have up first? Caller, you are live on the air. Kristen from Tennessee.
Good morning.
What's on your mind?
Hey, so about the whole suing schools, I think that's obviously a bad idea. And I'm from Tennessee, and like our legislator has been pumping out all these bills that are affecting public schools. And it seems to me that they are just doing everything they can to end public schools. And they've been trying, the GOP's been trying this forever. It's like go to charter schools and private schools, and it's just awful.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that call. Georgia, that is something I honestly, as a teacher, I taught at a regular public school, and I taught at a couple of charter schools, and you can see the redirection of resources from public schools to charter schools. But a lot of times, some of those charter schools are struggling themselves. While we switch out our callers, I do want to go to the other side of this, Georgia, for 1 second. And there's a couple of tweets that we'll get to after this next caller that really outlines it's more than just critical race theory that they're attacking here, right? They're going for the whole progressive ideology, the idea that anything about the environment, they're going against green, renewable energy education. They're trying to really undercut every bit of progress they can. So we'll get to those tweets in a minute. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Honored to be on the show with you, Ben. My name is Rob, calling from D.C. I'm a child of educators. My parents were teachers, vice principals, and my mother even started early childhood education in Washington, D.C. So I have a strong, interest in education. The concept that they're proposing is nonsensical from the simple standpoint that you have how many parents involved in a school. You're telling me you're going to get hundreds of parents to come to a consensus on a curriculum, and then what are their backgrounds? So, I mean, the concept is nonsensical to even begin with. And again, as a child of educators, it's not even possible. I've seen it. I've been in the classrooms. I know how much teachers invest in just coming up with supplies for kids. So the concept of suing student teachers is ridiculous. But the concept of having parents weigh in on curriculums, you don't write the curriculum, go to a private school that has a curriculum that you love. Leave public schools, have a standard of education, and go with it.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for your call this morning.
Thank you. Have a great day.
No, he's spot on, Georgia. What it is, even hearing you pose the question, right, made me feel the way the caller just felt.
We all have different opinions. I do think that it's important to say, okay, well, who does this serve? Who are we serving? And to get a poll, especially of our community here. And that's why it's so important to hear from you all of like, what are your thoughts on this? How are you seeing this? What has your experience been? Are there incidences or experiences where something like this might make sense? To me, I don't see it. And Ben, I know your experience doesn't match up with this being something that would be productive. But then how does somebody like DeSantis get into the position that he is in? Is Florida that much different? Is the community he's serving that much different? That they really do feel like this would be beneficial, that this would help advance their students' education? Or is this a matter of legislation that would help uphold white supremacy?
So before we go to the next caller, and I think Ben is coming back in a moment, we can probably go to at least one or two of the tweets on Mississippi just to kind of put that into the conversation, because what they're doing down there is just, is following in pattern.
It is a Twitter thread that we saw last night that I think actually kind of puts a nice pin focus on where we need to drill down from Black Poll. A whole bunch of numbers. You know how these usernames goes. But this is what they said on Twitter. They said in Mississippi, the whitewashing of history is happening in real time. The Mississippi Department of Education is proposing some changes to the social studies curriculum, and it really isn't being talked about enough. I've gone through the proposed changes, and here are some of the highlights. So this is what's happening in the curriculum in Mississippi. In kindergarten, no more defining rights and responsibilities of citizens. just define what a citizen is. Not that you have rights and the responsibilities, but that you are a citizen of the United States. Instead of recognized ways people celebrate their diverse cultural heritage, the proposal says to identify types of diversity in the classroom. I want to keep going. Just one more, and then we'll take the whatever callers we have left. They said, explain why rules, more added objectives, explain why rules should be followed. Recognize that leaders and authority figures establish rules to provide order, security, and safety. Explain that money is earned through work. Georgia, it's not just the critical race theory. It's not just the whitewashing of racism and white supremacy and slavery. They're going for the full democratic experiment. They're trying to instill into our kids' minds that fascism and authoritarianism and complete and total totalitarianism and control over your lives is okay. So I think they're starting with critical race theory, but they're going all the way to undermine democracy.
You know, and if it wasn't for corruption, then maybe we would be able to trust that political leaders really do have our best interest at heart. But I mean, when you look at the track record of this country, every time you take back the veil, it seems as though most of our political leaders lack integrity. So how can we blindly trust those who have not been doing what is best for us? Maybe, you know, in public, they put on a good show, but behind closed doors, we continuously see the outcomes that are being produced by their decisions. And when you look at all of the disparities, they're not equitable outcomes. This isn't just by chance. You know, and so I guess that's why, for me, this conversation about DeSantis is important. Who is he serving? Is this really something he's bringing forth because his constituents asked for it? Is this something he's bringing forth because he truly feels like it's going to be what's best for the students in his district? Or is this something that he's doing simply to uphold white supremacy?
The last caller for this morning will be Roller Dragon.
How are you, man? What's on your mind?
I'm literally amazed at the tweets that you just uncovered right there, because it solidified something in my head that really I didn't expect them to act on so quickly. The Republican Party and the right and the fascistic evangelical party have realized something. They can't change adults. They have to start young. They are taking it from base principles and trying to build this society from the ground up. This has got to be stopped. I don't know how. Absolutely. I don't know what devices we can use or what type of legislation we can pass. Obviously, we've seen that legislation does absolutely jack all for what we needed to do. We need something concrete that's going to stop this, because when you start playing with the truth of history, you end up in places like we are now.
Yeah.
And right now, we are in a very dangerous spot. Think about this. And I hate making these comparisons every time I freaking call. When you look at Germany and what Hitler did with the youth of that country, and from then up to completely bamboozle an entire population about a false religion, a false background, and a false backstory, and how successful he was at doing it, to the point where they invaded the rest of the world. That's what these totalitarians want. They want that power. Don't know why.
Roller Dragon, thank you so much for that call. Georgia, that part that he just, thanks so much, man. That part that you just said, that he just said about building something on a false religion, false backstory. That's the thing. History is backstory, Georgia, and they are trying to change the backstory so that there'll be a brand new generation of people who are brought up on the lies of their false backstory, of the false history, and they are trained and groomed to be good little citizens in their totalitarian society. That's what they want. Georgia, it's in your hands.
And even that by itself, it feels, although, when you think about the saying, history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, they already tried to do this. When I took American history in high school, there was a very, very short section on slavery, and the information that the public schools did share with us about slavery was grossly inaccurate. I mean, they tried to teach us that slaves typically were not beaten because they were considered assets. They were considered pieces of property.
That's right.
And so
if you wouldn't want to damage your property was the argument.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember I was a straight A student. I graduated top 20% of my class. But one day when I did get in trouble, it was the day that came up in American history. And I was outraged and ended up walking out of class and almost got kicked out of AP English because I wasn't having it. It was a lie, And so the reality of it is, if you look at who created that textbook, who authored that textbook, who is trying to put forth this narrative, it was a white man in that instance. And so there's been reports of similar curriculum being taught across the country. So it's not necessarily a new idea try and erase history. But what I do think, Ben, is that generation who was taught that watered down version of slavery, right? We're grown now and they see it didn't work.
That's right.
And so now they have to do a more effective job. They have to wash it again, because they didn't wash it enough. They, I guess, maybe decided, let's keep a little, let's try to give them just, a small, but now it feels like they're trying to remove everything that would give any historical context about what happened to Black people in this country. And if you ask me, because if there's any evidence that Black people in this country deserve reparations, well, then eventually somebody has to pay that bill eventually. Or at least we have a case that we can keep making for that. But if they erase the evidence, if they erase the history, how do your children's children advocate for reparations?
That's right.
How do they advocate for it?
That's the entire plan right there, Georgia, is to they're willing to wait. I'll put it like this. If we look and see how methodical and how patient they were executing their 50-year plan to undo Roe versus Wade, right? They took 50 years to be in the position that they're in now to strike at the core of Roe versus Wade. What's another 50 years to strike at the entire concept of democracy and freedom in the first place, right? I believe that's what they're trying to cut to. And they know they could bigot their way right into fascism.